Okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to get started on your mini investigation based on the coastal field trip you did to Tensmere Beach. So to complete this, you're going to need access to the document you can see on your screen, which is the instructions for writing your coastal mini project, which you will find in assignment 1. You should also open up the main template you're going to be doing all of your work in, which you will also find in assignment 1. And in that template, you will find the main headings like title, contents page, aims, and so on and so forth already embedded in that document. All you've got to do is do your piece of writing for each chapter. So you're going to want to start by typing in the title, whatever the agreed title is. And in this case, it's going to be to investigate the effect that the distance from the shoreline, and when we talk about shoreline, we're talking about at the sea, so there's the word shoreline, has on soil, a study of Tensmere Beach. So when we think about this title, we are moving away from a fixed point, which happened to be the shoreline, which is a point found on a beach, and we're moving directly perpendicular from that point away from that, heading inland. And our title also indicates where the investigation will occur. In this case, it's got one specific location, Tensmere Beach, so you would put that into a title. And in your own actual study, you'd be following a similar template. The next page, by the way, before we move on to the contents page, on the title page, it's more than likely you would put your own name, and there are some other details that you would put when it comes to doing your actual investigation in terms of word length, your school, and your candidate number. But you don't need, for this mini investigation, all you need is the title and your name as the author. And you may, and I would encourage you to put an image of Tensmere Beach, potentially one that you have taken yourself on the day. You might find you've got photos you took when we were there, or one that you find on the web. If you do take an image from a primary source, that's your own camera, underneath the photo you should say, put your name. So I might put A. Wiley, for example. And after that, I would add 2021 because that's when I took the photo. If your photo is taken from a source, like a web page, underneath the photo, you should name the source. You don't need to give the full web address, but you just put source www.beach.co.uk. So give the shortened version of the source. And then at the end of the project, which is the bibliography, which you will find the heading that says bibliography, you should put a little number 1, which indicates that it's your first source, and put the full web link there if you're using a photograph you've got from the web, because you're acknowledging that the photograph belongs to somebody else, not yourself. Incidentally, if you're putting the source underneath the photograph, you should also put a little number 1 there as well, so you can link up that little number 1 to the bibliography. After that, every other time you use something that's not your own work that you've got off the web, you should put your numbers in sequence. So for example, if you put a quote from what somebody said about beaches or soils, then if that was the second time you'd used a source that wasn't your own, you'd put number 2 next to both the quote and also in the bibliography, where you then place the web link. Right, let's move on to the contents page. So the contents page will grow as you complete the project, and it should indicate each of the chapters, and your first chapter is going to be the introduction, which would also happen to include the aim. And if it was just all done on one page, well, then you would just have the page number that your introduction is found on. And then you take a new page. And now we're on to the aims. Now, I'm giving you the aim, and the aim of your project is to determine how soil changes as you move further from the sea. Okay, so that's the main focus. That's what we're trying to achieve. We want to know by the end of this project what the soil is doing as we move further away from the sea. I'll be more specific on what we're studying when we get to the research questions, but at the moment our aim is quite general. We're just dealing with soil in general. Right. Don't take a new page here, because you're probably going to want your aim at the top of that page, big bold letters for your aim. And then you have another subheading. This time you write introduction. Okay, this is where you're starting to earn the marks. And in a real investigation, the introduction is going to be worth 4 marks. So what is the introduction? What should I be reading? Now, there's a number of ways to start the introduction. You can either start by straight away breaking down the aim, I'll tell you more about that in a second. Or you might want to start with a quote that you found off the internet, off a website, or something that somebody has said. And this quote might be something about the importance of beaches, or the importance of studying soil, or the importance of why it's important to know about how soil changes in a beach environment or on the coast. If you find some material on a website, a nice quote, maybe no more than 20 words, type it in. After you've put the quote, remember, whenever you do quotes, you would enter quote marks like that on there, and you put that indicates it's what somebody else has said. And after that, let's assume this is the second time you're giving evidence from the internet or from a source. You put a little brackets and a number 2. And then in the bibliography, you put a web link to where that quote had come from. Now, that's what a lot of students do. They like to start with something that's quite powerful, that's thought-provoking. The most important thing, if you're going to start with a quote, is it must be linked to why it's important to do a study, okay, of this nature. Right, if you're not starting with that, then you would launch straight into breaking down the aim. So breaking down the aim is just a couple of sentences that outline what the purpose of the investigation is. So here we've got a simple sentence. All you need to do is actually expand on that. What's this really looking at? What are we investigating? We're looking at how a soil characteristic changes with distance from the sea, and why the main reason to look at that is that soil is likely to change as you move away from the sea, because the sea has an impact on the development of soil, because the sea affects what can grow on the land, because obviously the sea is made of salt water, not fresh water, and it's very difficult for land-based plants as well as soil to develop in a saline or a salty water environment. So we're expecting changes in soil as we gradually move a further distance. But let's just develop this idea a little bit further. So what else are we expecting to change, and why are we expecting to change? Well, as you move away from the sea, you often end up in a sand dune environment. And sand dunes represent barriers between the sea and the land. They're basically small hills that run parallel to the sea. And behind sand dunes, you get shelter. So in those sheltered environments, it becomes possible for plants to start to develop. And obviously, plants are the foundation for soil. Also, as you move further away from the sea, your distance, the influence of saltwater intrusion, especially during high tides, starts to get less. And therefore, we would hope to see more plants be able to develop both in the sheltered environment, but also as they move further away from the sea. And obviously, as plants develop, we get to the point where it becomes possible for farming to occur. So we might be interested in investigating that. That might be an important reason. Now, you don't want to spend too long. You don't want hundreds of words here, but you do need to break down what the actual purpose is. You're going to study soil. And you're going to keep it general at the moment, because you're then going to move into the rationale. And the rationale, you're going to specifically start to talk about the changes that you're investigating, especially pH. Okay, so we are going to be investigating the acidity of the soil and how it changes. So that's going to represent one of the possible soil changes. We could study many other types of soil changes, but we're just going to look at the acidity of the soil. Now, why is that important? Why is the pH of soil important? You need justification, more than one, for why it is important to study these things. Now, there's a number of things you can do. You can start by thinking, why is it study soil? And you could find a source. Why do scientists study soil? And I might find a nice little interesting piece of information here, a quote, maybe a fact or a figure. I'd lift it from this website or any of the other websites I come across, and I might use that in my writing to back up why it's important to study how soil changes as you move further away from the sea. Remember, anytime you lift something from a source, you should always add a little number that's one higher than the one you've used before, and put the web link to that source in the bibliography. You might think that I also could explain why study sand dunes. So I might be able to lift a justification for doing this project by thinking about why are sand dunes so important? Because obviously the area that I have to be studying are sand dunes, because they are the area of land found, the first area of land found as you move away from the sea. Finally, I might decide to think about why study pH. soil. And do a Google search there and find out some reasons. Okay. Now, how well you write this is going to be critical for how many marks you get, because by the time I've read these first two, I should know what your study's about, and I should know why it's really important that somebody investigates this study. The final paragraph that you write should be about how you intend to conduct the study. Okay, now you're going to keep this quite light because there is a whole chapter down here called the methodology, which is where you expand on this. So what are you doing here? Well, you need first a breakdown of the data you need to gather in order to complete a study on pH. So think about the data we gathered. Don't need to tell me in detail how you got it, just the data that you're going to need. Okay, that's the what. You're also going to want where you're going to have to go to get this data. So you need to tell us there. You know, you're going to need a beach. You need a that's got good access, and you're going to specifically use Tentsmuir. You don't need to tell me why at this stage, but just I'm going to go to Tentsmuir to do this. Okay, and these two combined should then allow you to finish off your introduction by saying how the location and the data allows you to achieve your aim, which is up here. Right, now we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of words here. This should be kept reasonably short. In the mini project, I'm thinking a couple of hundred words, 300 tops. In your actual project, it's probably look more like 400. Okay, so that sums up what you're going to be doing on your introduction. Pay attention to all the words, rewind back what I've said, maybe use some of my suggestions about the Google searches you could conduct. I am going to be specifically looking at this bit here. I'm really interested to see on you justifying why you're doing this piece of work. I'm interested in the facts you find or statistics you might present in your intro that justify why this type of study is important.